Hey everyone, this is Zephyr, and welcome to the BaileyWiki channel, where we teach everyday DMs how to create truly amazing experiences for their players by combining art and technology. We also make modular systems and scenes that you can use without any setup, and some of those scenes are going to be the backdrop for today's video discussing the Foundry version 13 release. The stable or main release of v13 is right around the corner, and we expect to see it in the next couple of weeks. Testing 3 was also released recently that includes some iterations on previous features introduced in the v13 test builds, and also some new features that we wanted to cover, and also add some of our perspective as map makers and people involved in the module development community to discuss the things that we expect to see module and system developers create in v13. So today we're going to be talking about a lot of really exciting and interesting features that are coming to Foundry. But it's important to note that with every major core version update, there is also a lot of updating to the API and backend pieces that module and system developers interact with. So if you're running a game especially, hold off on updating Foundry until you've given your modules and systems a chance to catch up. We generally recommend that you wait at least a month after stable is out so that your modules and systems have gotten a chance to catch up. You can also check out our Foundry Basics video covering everything you need to know about updating major versions, like from v12 to v13. Now, with that little disclaimer out of the way, let's go ahead and dive into all of the exciting features and changes coming to Foundry v13. If you are wanting to test out all of the great new features with v13, or also just check whether your modules are compatible, starting with v13 testing 3, there is a great new option for Windows users, where if you go to your account on foundryvtt.com in your purchase licenses, for download versions, on the operating system there's now a Windows portable option. So if you select this, then this is going to first be starting with the release 13.338 or testing 3, but in the future this will apply to all future Foundry VTT versions. And then when you download this, you are going to get a zip file. When your zip file has downloaded, you can simply move or copy and paste this to the directory that you want. So for example, I have mine set up on my auxiliary drive, and I have the zip file right here. And then you can extract this with your tool of choice, whether that is Windows itself or a tool like 7-zip or WinRAR. And then within this folder, you have an entire Foundry instance that's completely portable. So you can also put this on a flash drive, etc. And with this, this is going to be a completely separate core version. And by default, it is going to point to your Foundry data folder. But you can see that I went in, and when I launched Foundry, I changed the test version that I have here of v13, and I specified a Foundry data-testing folder that is going to have all of my data. What I would recommend here is to take your Foundry data and create a zip file of that as well as a backup, and then you can rename things. So you can have Foundry data and Foundry data-testing so that your test environment points to testing, and then you can check everything with all of your modules, etc. installed. And you can see if anything is having issues, and you can play around with these cool new features that we're going to dive into. Another final note on the server side and the client side, there is an update to the Node.js version of Foundry VTT. It no longer includes a bundled client. So when you launch Foundry VTT via Node.js, it is not going to actually give you a client. You'll have to connect to it via a web browser, etc. So this makes it a lot lighter weight, and also is the default kind of cross-platform compatible version of Foundry now. For most users, you don't really have to worry about this, but if you are self-hosting and you want to have kind of separate instances of your DM copy of Foundry versus what's actually rendering and loading your server, then that is an option to keep in mind. Now that we've covered the client and installation options that are new in v13's testing 3 release, let's pop into Foundry itself to take a look at some of the other features. The first thing you'll notice is the UI here. And no, this is not a module. This is the default look of Foundry v13's user interface. So as you can see, when we hover over any of our tools or sidebar pieces, they are going to light up and become more opaque. What's also great is if you go into your configure settings, then there is a configure interface option here. Some of these options are familiar in V12, but they have been expanded a bit. Up at the top, we have our interface and our application kind of theming, whether we want to have a dark theme or a light theme or our browser default. So I'm sticking with dark here, and then we have the interface size. So the interface scale is a completely new iteration here, and this allows us to increase the size of all of the UI elements. So I'm going to leave it a little bit larger here for the purposes of this video. What's great about this is for module developers, they can now reference this interface scale so that you can have all of the different visual elements from a module scale with the Foundry default interface scale. So if you have something like Carousel Combat Tracker or a HUD module that normally has some independent scaling options, it can now be tied to this value as well to have some global sense of scaling so that hopefully you have to adjust that for fewer modules as we go by. There's also a lot of other settings in here, such as the opacity for the inactive pieces and how quickly they will fade in and out of opacity. There's also this option down here for chat notifications. And as you can see, when we close this, we have a chat box still visible here. So we can have the full messages appear for our chat, or we can have just pips indicating that we should open up the chat. And the entire sidebar is really neatly collapsible with this button right here. So this has a much more symmetrical look over here for our sidebar versus our tools over here. Also on the UI UX side of things is custom cursors. Here is a screenshot provided by the Foundry team of the custom cursor used in Ember. And with v13, system and module developers are going to be able to add in some options for giving you custom cursors within Foundry. So we're excited to see all of the crazy and cool designs that system and module developers come up with. We also expect there to be at least one module that comes about that allows you to create or add in your own custom cursor rather than just picking from a list. One of the really flashy additions to v13 is animated doors. This is a really cool new feature. There is nothing new here in testing 3 versus testing 2, so if you've seen video coverage earlier of v13, nothing new to add here, but we want to make sure to recap it. So when you have these doors, you can specify, just like you can specify a sound, you can also specify an animation type. So here we have swing, and then we can select a door texture. Now, there are included a lot of door textures with v13. If you go into the core data in Canvas, then there's the door section. We got large and small. Large is meant to occupy 2 squares per door. So you can select from a variety there. So right now we have this large ashen wood door from Forgotten Adventures. And then you can choose whether you have double doors or not, and then whether to flip the texture, our animation duration, so how long it takes to open, and the directions for opening, and finally the animation strength. So the stronger you make it, the greater the opening here. So we have that there, and this is set up as a double door, and as you can see, this is opening just fine, and it's splitting it. Here we have a single door is moving through, and over here we have a Bailiwiki door that we have increased the animation intensity of to 2. So now it's, instead of opening just to 90 degrees, it's opening all the way around. So you can use this to play around with having doors that open more like, say, an extra 30 or 45 degrees after you open it. So this is a really cool space, and as we mentioned, this is a Bailiwiki door, so you can use your own doors, and that is the main space where we anticipate module developers to really iterate on. Just a lot of great artwork for the doors and everything, and then possibly some additional animation types. We've already showcased the swing and everything, but there are a few others. So if we switch this over to swivel, it then rotates about the midpoint. So you can have some pretty cool effects. All of this works just by drawing in your door and then selecting the animation type that you want. You have to have an animation type in order to apply a texture. And then we can just pick a specific door tile that we want here. And it's going to automatically scale it. And you'll notice that this is going to kind of keep stretching left to right, but it's not really stretching up and down. So there are some considerations here, and we'll put out a tutorial or a video discussing what you need to know when it comes to creating your own custom door textures. But there's going to be some really good options right out of the box. As we already mentioned, we anticipate module developers and just content creators in general to create more of these custom wall types and adding in some other pieces. For example, we're looking forward to having mass-headed presets that include these nice doors, but then have a tile beneath them for door jambs. Speaking of, there is also some important things to keep in mind here. Whenever you open the door, the wall is not moving itself. It is staying put. It's just the texture here that is changing. So there's not dynamic lighting or vision applied by having the door animated. So this possibly presents another opportunity for module developers to augment that particular system, and also perhaps introduce some additional scaling here, like how we have the portcullis continuing to stretch in one dimension, but not in the other. So maybe with some module development, we can expand upon some of these features and give us a little bit more granular control. Either way, it's an exciting feature that's going to make maps look a bit more immersive. The winner of the Patreon feature poll and flag mark feature for Foundry V13 is token drag movement. Now, if you've seen videos covering this in the V13 testing 2 build, but not a more recent one, then the controls have changed a little bit since that initial testing release. First, when you have a token selected, as you left click and drag to move them around, you'll notice that you are getting a ruler kind of measurement here that is telling you how far the movement is and showing the path. If you hold down Control and release left click while you're doing that, you then left click to add multiple points along here to give this whole path. Whenever you are ready, you can then release Control, and then your final left click will execute the movement to that point. You can also hold down Alt as you begin the movement, and you'll see that there is this eye icon that indicates that this movement is hidden. So this is useful as a DM if you are trying to plot out some movement for your creatures so that your players aren't able to see that. And then, just like before, release your Control and Alt, and then left click, and you will execute the movement. Another option is as you move around, you can keep left click held and then hit the F key by default to place waypoints along your path. And then when you are done, release left click and it will execute the movement. If at any point you have a waypoint that you don't like, then you can right click to remove it, similar to how when you draw polygons with the drawing tool, you can right click to remove that, and you can cancel the entire movement by hitting the escape key. You also will have noticed that our token is rotating around just fine and automatically on their own, and we do not have any modules that affect this enabled right now. So this is another new core feature. And when you open up the token and go into the appearance, see that there is the lock artwork rotation, and that is by default off. And that allows the automatic rotation, but if you turn that lock artwork rotation on, then it's not going to rotate. As far as module developers go, there is a full API system for tying into these indications for the movement. As you can see here, we've got the walking speed and the total movement that we're making in the larger text, and then in parentheses, we have the smaller text. There is an API for adding on additional context here. For example, if you have other movement types, or if you want to display additional information along here as well. So we look forward to seeing what module developers come up with there. Additionally, there is also a new region behavior that is going to modify the movement cost. As of right now, this just has the walk option here, but we anticipate this to be fleshed out either by systems or core itself to expand upon the different definitions here so that you have walk, fly, etc. That way you could have areas that say are strong winds so that if you are flying, you have a reduced movement cost, but if you are on the ground, then you do not suffer an increased movement cost. And as you can see, when we walk over to it, and as you can see, when we go to move over this, it is costing us substantially more movement to go these squares here versus going in the other direction. So this is properly multiplying our movement cost. If you have other effects that are increasing movement cost, it will be multiplicative with this rather than additive. So it's always going to double whatever the current cost is. So if you have two things, then it's going to be 4 times as expensive rather than, say, 3 times as expensive. Next, we've got some updated combat encounter features. So if we add everyone to combat here, and we begin the combat, then we'll see that we now have these little turn markers. So if we go ahead and roll the initiative for everybody, as we advance through this, we're going to have our turn marker. This is completely configurable inside of the game settings here. We have the section for the combat tracker, and this lets you disable the turn markers entirely or change the animations. So instead of a spin, it's spin pulse, or there's no animation if you already have something animated or you want a static image. So we can, of course, then go into our personal data or modules that we may have, and we can select whatever logo that we would like. You can also apply a disposition tint and configure other aspects of the combat tracker. But these are the new ones here for the token turn markers. So when we save those changes, we'll see that we now have a tinted and Bailiwiki logo here that is going to move around and change colors. And it'll be nice and red for our enemies, green for our allies. And if we go ahead and make one of these bearded devils into a neutral enemy, we'll see that they have a kind of gold color. And secret is purple. So you can have some extra color coding and you can really have a lot of fun with this rather than needing a whole separate module. We anticipate module developers to maybe expand upon some of the animation options that we have here, or just provide a nice pack of different logos that you can use for your turn markers. Finally, on the token front, we've had token lights for quite a while where we can emanate light from our tokens and it will move with them, etc., kind of simulating if they're holding a lantern or a torch. But what we haven't had is token darkness. So if I go ahead and turn this on, we'll see that we have this pool of darkness around our token here. And it's completely blocking vision, just like a regular darkness source for an ambient light would work. So rejoice all of you nefarious little warlocks and your darkness devil sight combos. You can now have that travel around with you properly. So we expect there to be a lot of cool automation pieces for spells and effects in various systems that take advantage of the darkness mechanic in general. And brand new to v13 testing 3 are some sound API hooks. These are going to be really useful for module developers in a lot of different ways, but the way that you can play around with them right now is with the new sound reactive pulse animation on lights. So right now there's no sound playing, but as soon as I turn on my preview, we have this kind of carnival or a carousel theme here, and we can see that these lights are bouncing around as we go. If we disable that, this also reacts to your playlists, so if we hit this dark chanting, we'll notice that this light here is reacting as well, and to a different extent than these other lights on the scene. So this is going to react to whatever sound the client is experiencing. It is visually synced with the audio that the client is experiencing, so you don't have to worry about starting a playlist or a song on a scene that you have reactive lights for. that your players are going to have a desynchronization, like, maybe one person's hearing the song like a beat early and then the lights are out of whack. The lights are going to match the sound for them, which is a pretty cool technique. When it comes to setting this up, the sound reactive pulse here is a little unintuitive at first blush, but we're hoping that some of this gets clarified and expanded upon a bit more in the future. So first off, our animation speed is just going to be how quickly this reacts to the music. The higher you have this, the quicker it will react to changes to the sound. So you can get some pretty dramatic pieces there. Then we have the animation intensity. And intensity you can almost think of as mixing. It starts at 5 by default, and that's going to have kind of equal weighting to all of the different tone values of the music. But as you raise the intensity, it is going to focus more on higher notes, and as you lower it, it will focus more on lower notes. And you can also reverse the direction so that it is going to be inverted in terms of when it's getting larger and smaller based on the music. So you can do some pretty cool combinations with this. However, there are some limitations. As we mentioned earlier, this is going to be based off of the sound that the client is experiencing. As of right now, the only way to influence that is just having things playing. But it's going to combine things with what is being played. So if you have this ambient sound beacon that the player is hearing, and you also turn on a playlist sound or you have a music track going, it's going to kind of mix them together, but they're going to be relative to each other. It's looking at the whole picture of sound. So you can't really isolate this to just being the ambient sounds or just being the playlist or even a more specific sound that it's listening for. Further, if we have a sound beacon that is outside of the range of these lights, so if we move this way over here, and we can see this is on, it's still affecting these lights as long as I'm hearing it. Now, as we mentioned, this is a part of a whole new suite of sound reactive APIs for developers that we're really hoping is going to result in some really fantastic adjustments and improvements to this particular feature, and also some other brand new ones to make some really cool audio reactive scenes where we can change lighting or swap around different aspects of it, maybe changing how regions behave based on the time of day. We're really excited about the prospect of creating maps where we have a thunderstorm playing in the background, and then we have lights that are listening specifically to the thunderstorm and flashing when we hear the lightning go. So there's a lot of really cool possibilities with that, but for right now, this is mainly some cool eye candy until module developers get their hands on it and can really start making some amazing modules and adjustments with those sound reactive API pieces. And that's going to conclude our coverage on Foundry version 13 and all of the cool new features coming to Core Foundry. Again, this stable release is right around the corner, but make sure that you hold off on updating or you use a test environment like that Windows portable version that we outlined earlier in the video. In the comments, let us know what you are most excited about for Foundry V13 and what kind of module development opportunities you're most interested in seeing. Of course, also let us know if there's anything that you feel we missed in our coverage of Foundry V13. Once again, this has been Zephyr with the Bailey Wiki channel, and if you enjoyed this video, then subscribe to keep up with all of our latest content, and ring the bell to make sure you never miss a video. Also consider becoming a patron. Not only do you support the channel, but you'll also gain access to all of the modular systems and scenes that we have for Foundry VTT, including the ones that you've seen in the background here today. Again, it's been Zephyr. Thank you so much for watching, happy gaming, and have a good one.